Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello and welcome to The Late Show. Today on Tuesday, here on Teacher Talk Radio. Tonight I've got a great show for you. I'm joined by Stephen, he's from Resus Rangers, and we're going to be talking all about kind of first aid and how that needs to fit within the curriculum, because there's been lots of changes over the last few years and not a lot of people are kind of aware of them, and we need to think about how as schools we're providing these skills, but also they are just really important skills that our students need to know. So Stephen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hello, my name is Stephen from Resus Rangers. I'm the program manager for the company. So it's my job to design the resources for the company and also deliver the workshops to schools as well. So we design resources for primary schools and secondary schools to deliver first aid lessons in a fun and non-threatening way. My job is to design these resources, which I love doing. And equally, I love visiting the schools and seeing all the children learn first aid skills as well.
And it's that kind of change, isn't it? And it happened in kind of 2020. So post-COVID, that we've now got to include these requirements in our curriculum. And what do the kind of documents say about that? So kind of how can you kind of break it down to schools that haven't potentially seen those documents?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, the guidance came into effect in 2020 as part of the PSHE national curriculum, particularly for the physical health and mental well-being section of the curriculum. So the first aid guidance in itself is basically 2 lines that they added into the guidance, which if I could bring up in front of me, it says, for primary schools, pupils should know how to make clear and efficient emergency call and concepts of basic first aid like head injuries is all it says. And that's for primary. And for secondary schools, they talk about CPR, use of defibrillators, and also some basic first aid skills as well. So yeah, not a lot to go on in terms of the first aid guidance. So a lot of schools were came across these guidances and said, it's very vague. We're not quite sure exactly what the lessons entail, what skills they need. It's quite difficult for schools to work out exactly what was asked of them from the government.
It's that quite vague thing, but as I'm a mother of a primary school child. He's in year 2, and this time last year actually, I had a pulmonary embolism. And being a single mother at home, I had to very much kind of teach my child, right, if mummy, you can't wake mummy up, you need to call 999. If you still can't like wake up, then it's like you need to go across the road and go knock on the teachers. Luckily, I've lived opposite teachers, and I've got teachers the other side as well. I'm in a very teachery neighbourhood. It's like, go and ask them and go tell them that there's something wrong. But it wasn't until that happened to me and I realised that I was in quite a severe situation where it could happen at any point, that I needed to do that with my son, and he needed to have that kind of understanding of what that experience is. So it's quite a scary thing to teach them, but it is quite an important skill to kind of for them to know. And like I don't remember seeing them so much now, but I remember when I was younger, there was quite often like kids on TV that were like, oh, they called 999 because mummy collapsed or what have you. And it was quite like they would be all on This Morning, and it would be this kind of fun promotion thing about how amazing this kid is. But you don't really hear that happening. And it wasn't until I was thinking about this, I was like, is that because these kids aren't being taught to do that? Or is that because we're just in a tech savvy world and actually that's not happening? But I think actually since COVID, everyone is potentially a little bit more sick than they were prior to COVID because of all the complications. That actually this is really important, and we've kind of let it slip a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, since COVID, I think health has become sort of the forefront of public consciousness at the moment, where we're very sort of, since that pandemic, we're very health conscious, thinking, what would we do if we were suddenly hospitalized? What would we do if we were stuck at home one day with just a 3-year-old? How would we get help? And I think that sort of came into effect as well. I think before COVID as well, and the reason why this guidance came into effect in the first place was actually due to the Manchester bombings in what I believe was 2017. And the inquiry that came out as a result of that was they said a lot of the people there didn't know a lot of basic first aid skills that could have been some help in that situation. And that's what kickstarted this conversation about, okay, really, we should be teaching children first aid skills, but how to go about teaching them in a way that doesn't scare them or doesn't, terrified them in any way.
And I think that's the thing. I potentially took it for granted. I beach lifeguarded on that beach there
Hmm.
when I was 18 at university.
Yeah.
I think literally, oh no, where am I? That was my lifeguard hut there.
Oh,
Um,
lovely.
and it was an amazing experience. Like I joined the first year, it was overtaken by the RNLI and had
Hmm.
that training. And then actually, once I finished that, I went traveling and lived abroad for quite a long time. And I lived in South Africa, and they do not have any first aid
No.
out there. And I remember a guy got very injured by a propeller on a boat, and I was the only person that knew how to tourniquet his leg on a whole entire beach with kind of a couple of hundred people on it.
Yeah.
I think, although we're not talking to that extent, but being able to administer first aid it can make
Mhm.
such a difference, and it can be a life or death situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I emphasize with the children as well, is that hopefully you never have to do anything we teach you guys. But if the situation were to happen, you at least have some skills in the back of your mind there years down the line. They think, oh, I remember this back in school. This is how you call 999. This is how you put on a bandage. So yeah, it's about starting the knowledge young, I think, and building up over time. I think that's really important.
And you said you do it in a kind of a fun way, because this is quite a scary thing to teach kind
Hmm.
of primary school teachers, students. How do you go about kind of making it fun and making it not kind of quite scary for them?
So this is how the Resus Rangers came about altogether, because we knew sort of going into 2020 that it was going to be part of the curriculum. So we researched what resources were already out there, and the leading organisations like St John's Ambulance and British Red Cross, they had resources for children, but they weren't. It wasn't like a whole package really, and the resources they did have were very um, sterile. I would say they're not very kid friendly, especially for primary school children. They're just long text sheets with a few diagrams, and it wasn't very accessible to young children or children with who are SEN as well. So we decided to go in a different direction, and we thought, well, what do children take in? What do they consume on a daily basis? Cartoons. And a lot of cartoons nowadays, like Peppa Pig and Bluey, just to give a couple of examples, they have a lot of very real world messages in them that the children learn young, then build up over time. So we thought, why don't we have a first aid program that's centered around some animated characters who go on this journey and teach their friends how to do first aid? So that's sort of the approach we took, really. So that child-focused approach. What do children consume? How do they learn? And how can we make it as fun as possible while teaching them some real-life skills? So yeah, we decided cartoons was the way we were going to go.
I love the idea of having characters, and
Mm,
it takes away that kind of scary element for kids. And
yeah.
what age do you like start at? Do you do it really young? Like how low in the primary school do you kind of do it?
Yeah, so we go from early years all the way up to year six for primary schools. Then secondary schools, we go year seven all the way up to year 13.
And how does that vary? So how do you have different one kind of per year group? Is it something that kind of schools can
Mhm.
kind of get year on year and it will build on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have three different models for our company. We have a service where teachers can subscribe to our resources. They deliver the lessons themselves. We have an assembly package and workshops we can bolt on as well. So with the resources, we break them down into key stages. So we have key stage one, and then we break key stage two into two halves. We've got a lot of topics for key stage two. So key stage one, the focus is really on what to do in an emergency. So how to call for help, how to look after a friend, and a few basics of what's inside a first aid kit as well. Then as you go into key stage two, as the brain starts to develop, we then introduce a few more skills like the recovery position, the basics of CPR, and a couple of medical conditions as well. So yeah, key stage one is very much the basics of first aid, and key stage two is sort of building on that knowledge as they work their way through primary school.
And what kind of things do you think are most useful that they kind of take away from it? Or what kind of feedback have you had that kind of the kids have gone and used it? Or because even the
Mm.
playground, that quite often things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest focus we have for key stage one and key stage two is that how to act in an emergency. So when is it appropriate to call 999? What to do if a friend falls over? Where do we find first aid kits as well? So it's kind of the little skills like that, the everyday first aid is what we call it. And that's what really drives it home, I think, the stuff that happens to them on a daily basis. So of course, with a primary school child, it's every other day. They're going to fall over, they're going to bump their head, kind of a graze on their knee. And if they learn about the process behind why we do first aid, then the next time they fall over, they're going to think to themselves, oh, I'm having first aid now. And it sort of builds on that skills day on day, really.
And how do you expect kind of teachers to use the resources? What kind of, because this is the thing, we're all very, very busy and we don't have enough time to now plan loads of stuff. So the fact that you guys have resources ready to go is great. But what can they kind of expect from those resources? What are they going to look like for somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. So a resource package is really the whole package when it comes to a lesson planning. So it comes with a PowerPoint with our animations embedded inside. We have activity sheets. I believe across the primary school network, we have 130 plus activity sheets at the moment.
Wow.
It's very much pick and choose as well. So you can do a core lesson where you just have the basics of first aid, or you can do week on week a new first aid lesson each week. Very much depends on your timetabling, how much time you have to spend on a topic such as this. So yeah, we have the PowerPoints with animations, we have activity sheets, comprehensive lesson plans as well, which aren't, they're great, they're absolutely fantastic, because what you can do is, again, that one lesson, or you can chop and change bits from different lessons and merge them together. So it's very much, we do all the work for the teachers, but they can adapt it in any which way they need to for their school. And then we also include a quick user's guide as well, which tells you how to operate the PowerPoints, what to do, a bit of troubleshooting as well, how to answer some awkward questions from children as well, because there's bound to be a few, and then some certificates for the children as well.
Oh, I love the fact there's a how to answer awkward questions, because there's always one. There's always one that loves it. So that's great.
The one I always get is, can you do first aid on a dog? That's one I get every single time I do a workshop.
They probably do it, to be fair. They could, I can see them at home practicing on their dog and wrapping up their poor paws. They're probably
The
like,
mum don't go, no, stop.
Yeah, my son would definitely do it any chance he got. And I think, but that's quite nice, isn't it, that they go home and they're enthusiastic about it, although human life is really important as well. But how, so obviously it's really great that they can kind of have you talk through the PowerPoints if they need. How long do you reckon, did that take to talk through, or do you think it's quite generally people tend to click with it quite easily?
Yeah, the feedback we've had is very much they just load up the PowerPoints, have a quick scroll through, read through the lesson plans, and then it's pretty much ready to go for the teachers. We've not had any sort of difficulties with the program at all so far, which is fantastic. But yeah, teachers feel confident in teaching the lessons, which is great to hear.
Well, that's going to be my next question, because I'm quite confident in teaching it in the fact that I've got all these experience and I love a story because I can help sell it. But for a teacher that doesn't really have experience in first aid, and then to go and teach that, how do they build the confidence to be able to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So so what we offer as part of a resource package is we can do an hour-long training session with the teachers as well, which isn't a first aid qualification at all. It's just talking through, this is what you talk about in this lesson. These are the basic skills you need to teach it. Some keywords as well. And the keywords and all definitions are put into the lesson plans as well. So it lessens the amount of time they're Googling before each lesson, really.
And if anyone is kind of watching, feel free to comment any questions that you've got, or go and have a look at Resus Rangers on their website and kind of have a little look, and then you can come and ask us any questions. It's resusrangers.com. So that is where you need to pop to if you need to know anything. And I suppose for secondary schools, it's gone into their PSHE curriculum. Obviously there's a lot of things in there. How important is it, and how much time do they need to give to it, and how do you feel that this move and this shift of adding it in has kind of impacted the curriculum?
Yeah, so obviously PSHE is such a huge topic to get through. A lot of schools that I visited are very, they're trying to dedicate as much time as they can to important topics that are added on year on year on year with PSHE. So first aid is one of those things, because it came about in 2020, it's one of those things where some teachers perhaps weren't aware it was compulsory, and other teachers are aware it's compulsory, but they simply don't have the time to deliver first aid lessons. So this is why we come in and we say, we can plan them all for you. We can deliver as many or as few lessons as you like, as long as you are fulfilling your national curriculum requirements. So we find a lot of secondary schools are very interested in workshops as well. So they can dedicate one day, we come in, teach as many children as we can, and then that fulfills their requirement for them.
And how many kids do you do in a group? And how long are those sessions?
So for primary, we can fit roughly 60 students per lesson, and that lasts up to 2 hours, depending on key stage, with breaks. And then for secondary schools, about 45 students per lesson, and that again up to 2 hours, sometimes a little bit longer as well, depending on what they would like us to cover.
And how does that differ? Do you bring all the Resus? Is it Resus Annie? If I remembered right?
Yeah, that's it, Annie.
I remember her.
Yeah.
And do they get to play with those and have a go on those and things like that? And is it with that many kids, are they able to all have a go? And I feel like kids these days, I'm going to use the old since COVID, they're not necessarily as confident, and that can be quite a big thing doing that in front of other people. So how do you kind of manage that?
Yeah, so with our primary school children, again, we've taken a slightly different approach. We do bring in the Annie dolls, absolutely. But one of our selling points is that we ask the children to bring in teddy bears from home. So initially, they learn the skills of CPR using their teddy bears, which is great fun to see all the children like bouncing on the teddy bear, sing along to Staying Alive as they go along.
Yes. Is it Vinnie Jones that did like the video with him
yeah,
staying
Vinnie Jones.
Yeah.
I cite that all the time when I do training. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so the primary school children, we ask them to bring the teddy bears in, and then once they've learnt the skill of doing CPR, we then bring out the Resus Annies and they have a go at doing them as well, often in little groups, so they can huddle together and encourage each other to do CPR as well.
I love the idea that they're all bringing in their teddies. I feel like the secondary school students would bring in their teddies.
Oh yeah, well. Secretly they would. Secretly they would.
What a great idea, and what a great way to kind of introduce them. It's just such a lovely kind of concept.
Yeah. And it means they can take it home with them as well, because they bring the teddy bears in, they practice, then go home, they show mummy and daddy, this is what I learned today.
And I can see all the teddy bears going home with little arm bandages and eye patches, and
that's right.
or like at home being very well looked after.
Yeah, with slightly squash chest.
Yeah, but it's just like it is that kind of fun element, and having first aid, which can be a really scary situation, but actually be kind of a reality. And I think especially like with the secondary school students, there's obviously also the issue with we've seen a massive increase in young carers, that a lot of them are having to probably do some of this first aid, or they're learning stuff on the course that they're able to transfer to home. How would you suggest like teachers kind of manage that in terms of kind of thinking about that situation?
Yeah, so of course PSHE is a very public conscious subject. So we find our resources has a lot of links to other areas of the PSHE curriculum, like mental health, like looking after people as well, even science as well, talking about medical conditions and such. So we find that first aid sort of like complements the rest of the curriculum quite nicely, whilst being very much being its own thing. So we find that even if teachers don't have the time to do a dedicated first aid lesson, when they talk about other areas of citizenship, it very easily embeds itself into it.
And kind of the secondary school students, in terms of how that fits in within the curriculum requirements, so they can either do that kind of day. Does it say anything in terms of what year groups they have to do it in, or is it meant to be that they do a little bit in each year? How is that kind of built in terms of Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 and 5? You said you go all the way. Is it a requirement for Key Stage 5? Because I didn't realise that.
No, not up to Key Stage 5, but we figured a lot of schools have sixth form units attached to them. So, while we're doing secondary school, why not do the sixth form as well? Why leave them out at the end of the day?
It's an important life skill for them when they go to uni. They're going to need it.
Absolutely. So the curriculum says that pupils should know. So it doesn't specify Key Stage 3 learn this, Key Stage 4 learn this. It just says people should know, CPR, defibrillators, basic first aid skills as well. But our mission really as Resus Rangers is to have everyone in every school learn first aid, because it only takes that one person to make a difference.
And in terms of kind of them being able to kind of practice and try it, so obviously you've got the dolls or for the primary, and then they've got the Resus Annies in the secondary. Do they kind of do you find that a lot of the schools then want to come back and do it again, that the kids are then more involved and want to, is there like different levels in terms of activities if kids want to learn more beyond what the initial session is? Because I found that at my school we have an enrichment club, so kids quite often dabble in things and get into it, and then they want to do it in more detail, if that makes sense. I was just kind of wondering what other options there are as well, if people kind of find that, because I find this is something that actually I've got quite a few kids that are in St John's and kind of interested in that, but they do it all outside of school, and there isn't necessarily that opportunity inside of school.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we operate both the resources and our workshops is we operate a spiral curriculum. So every year that we visit, each year group will learn a new skill. So for year 3, for example, they start off by looking at choking and asthma. Then year 4, they move on to talking about head injuries and broken bones as well. Year 5, talk about bleeding and sepsis, so blood control and infection. And year 6 then learn about CPR. So we build up year on year on year, and it sort of gets them excited. Oh, next year learn about CPR. Brilliant. So yeah, we operate in that sort of spiral curriculum. Same for Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 as well.
And I've got my friend who's a PSHE lead. She's messaged me a question. What are the biggest first aid challenges facing teenagers? So what do you think that they're kind of actually more likely to deal with?
Absolutely. So as part of our resources, both resources and workshops, we do have a whole lesson on cuts and wounds, and it talks very specifically about stab wounds and injuries such as that as well, like broken glass. We also have a module on the effects of drugs and alcohol on the body as well, and how it affects the way we deliver first aid. So I'd say that especially drugs, alcohol, knife crime as well. So we talk about that quite a lot, and how we would help a friend if that situation were to occur.
I'm going to embarrass my sister. My sister is a nurse practitioner, and I remember her training as a nurse, and her trainee nurse friend at uni were out drunk, and they came across somebody that had fallen over and had is it compound fracture, the open fracture?
Yeah,
I remember all my terminology. And they were trying desperately to help, but were a little intoxicated. I think they did help, but I just remember being like, oh, I don't know whether you should have helped. And I think that's quite interesting to think about. But I think, especially like in the news in terms of Wales, we had the stabbing that happened in the school last week. We've had also the previous stabbing that's happened. I think kids having weapons in school is on the rise, and that is a really, really scary concept. But I think actually kind of talking about the consequences, or what that wound looks like and what the consequences of that wound is, and how that could physically affect somebody is a conversation that we need to have with those children. I think they don't necessarily know the consequence of bringing these weapons into school and following through with that and seeing what happens. So it's kind of having that conversation and letting them really know the reality of what they're doing. But also really important that we're counteracting it and giving them those kind of tools to, if the worst case scenario does happen, that actually they're equipped to use it. But that is quite a sensitive topic. I mean, it's obviously, some of it's a little bit localized depending on where you are, how much you're experiencing that in your school. But how have you felt that that's like something that an issue, or something that's on the rise, or there's more questions from kids about that kind of area?
Yeah, absolutely. As part of my workshops, I have visited a few behaviour referral schools as well. And of course, these are schools where behaviour is a large focus. And there are children there who perhaps have some involvement with county lines, for example. They're part of gang culture as well. And a lot of them, maybe not aware of the consequences of what would happen if the worst were to happen. So they often have a few questions as well about, what would I do if someone, I saw someone in the street and they were having a seizure, they were stabbed, they were bleeding out. What would I do? So that's a question I've had a few times from the more confident children. But of course, they're the quiet ones that sit at the back, and they don't want to ask too many questions. They don't want to get too involved. But yeah, I think everyone gets something out of having that conversation, really. So it's not just the talkative children that experience it; it's the quiet children who may experience it outside of school as well.
And I think that goes, because you've said obviously mental health is something that you cover as well. And obviously, my experience of it has been that kind of cutting has definitely been on the rise over the last few years. And kind of, I've very much taken from my first aid experience kind of to talking about kids and making sure that they're clean and that they are cleaning the wounds and stuff, and thinking about that in terms of from a safeguarding point of view, making sure that they have that equipment to be able to do that and they know how to do it. And I think that's quite an important thing, because obviously it's a really difficult conversation to have, but actually kind of educating these students in doing it so they kind of look after themselves, because some of them it is that release, and I've talked about it on other shows about student mental health, and I think it's a really difficult conversation, but actually that's a really important aspect that we need to talk about, even if it's not directly in that kind of you need to do this if you're doing this, but being able to teach them about how to kind of dress a wound and clean a wound and educate them on that, and no matter how big the wound and what the consequences are if you don't, is also kind of a really important thing. And these are such difficult things for teachers to kind of navigate, and I think that's where you kind of come in are really important. How do you find that you're able to support teachers in having these difficult conversations?
As part of our lesson plans, as well as having the key words, we have a lot of different strategies as well, especially for these typical lessons, like like drugs and alcohol, like the cuts and wounds as well. And as I said, we have that sort of FAQs part of the lesson plans as well. So what to do if this question is asked? How do you support that? And a lot of it comes down to safeguarding as well. So a lot of what we say is, if you are concerned about the questions the child is asking, of course, refer to your SENCO, refer to a safeguarding lead. So yeah, we discuss that a lot in our resources as well, how to keep not only the children mentally okay, but also the teachers as well.
I'm going to put you on the spot. You might not be able to do them off the top of your head. Have you got any of the kind of examples for the questions of what to say if a kid asks you this?
Oh, that is put me on the spot. So yeah, especially with cuts and wounds, we do talk about a lot of the effects of shock as well, and we say because when a body goes through shock, through hypovolemic shock with loss of body fluid, what happens to the body is as it loses oxygen, the brain starts to shut down, and as the brain shuts down, sometimes the person can become very anxious, very restless, sometimes violent as well. So we talk about that list of signs and symptoms on the board, and then when we go through the lesson plan, it then explains that in a bit more detail. So what to do if you feel unsafe doing first aid? Do you take a step back? Do you call 999? So how to navigate dangerous situations, really. So that's putting a lot of detail in the lesson plans as well as the PowerPoints as well.
And I suppose that's kind of one of those things in terms of it's knowing what to say at the right times, and kind of obviously it's easier if you kind of have your own personal experiences but your own personal views as well. But do you have like kind of ground rules in terms of kind of how to broach certain subjects, or steps to kind of help teachers in that respect of, or ideas in how to kind of introduce those in a kind of lighter way to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting with our lesson plans, at the beginning of each lesson plan, there's a section on ground rules within the classroom. So very much saying that this is a safe space for the children. They can ask as many questions as they like. This is how to combat the slightly more difficult questions as well. And then, yeah, we very much say if something concerning is being raised, of course, we refer to safeguarding. But yeah, otherwise, we very much make sure the teachers are aware that first aid is an emotive subject. So just thinking about how we can deal with those emotions, really.
And in terms of student emotions, if a child does get upset, or how is there, have you found certain ways that help prevent that, or do you find that certain students will shy away from certain things, or are there kind of sections that you find easier in smaller groups or breakout groups and things like that? Are there bits that are kind of, this bit might need a bit of kind of sensitivity, or you might want to warn these students about this bit, or I don't know, in terms of the PowerPoint and the resources, I worked with a beach lifeguard that would faint at the sight of his own blood.
Yep.
Everybody else's blood was fine, but his own blood, he would faint. And we had a very tragic, I'm like
Yeah.
not selling it. He cut himself climbing over a fence and fainted and landed on the fence quite painfully. So in that respect, because you do have those things that you have to, they're the extra little things that potentially you don't think about. Like, are there bits like that, any situation like that, you've got warnings or things to think about within the resources?
Well, interesting enough, when we do our feedback about lessons, we do often ask, were there any difficulties in the lesson? And so far, we've not had any, because of the nature of our resources, especially with primary schools, because it's all cartoon based. If there is any blood, and there's one lesson where you see one drop of red, which could be blood, could be ketchup, it could be anything with the children. That's the only time where they see any. I don't want to say gore, but they don't see anything worse than that at all. And then for secondary, my rule when creating the resources was I'm not going to have any blood in any of the PowerPoints, because the point of these lessons is to educate them about first aid, not to train them to be fully qualified workplace first aiders. It's about giving them the necessary tools and the skills and the confidence to do first aid. So my thing was, if I'm showing, a person bleeding out on the PowerPoint, how is that productive for especially the sensitive children who are going to see that, think, oh God, and then start a domino effect around the classroom. Again, my rule with secondary schools was I'm not going to show anything very graphic. I'm going to talk about the effects of it, absolutely, but I'm not there. We're not here to scare children at all. We're here to educate them at the end of the day.
That's really lovely, because I very much remember my early first aid training just being like loads of gory pictures and being like, what are we watching? I mean, I was quite intrigued by it, but there's always going to be that kid that is going to be intrigued by it. And especially when I went on to my first aid training later on, I was trained by a paramedic who was the first person that drive post the London bombings and saw the bus explode in the background, and then went and dealt with that, and had to where I live quite next to the Buckton power plants, and they were actually like, well, actually this is really important for you guys, because if that was to be attacked, then we'd need to consider that and what we do in our area. And I think it is that kind of getting that experience is quite interesting. But do you guys work, am I right in saying that you work with like local kind of paramedics and other people, and you can sometimes get them into schools or help connect in that respect?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with first aid training organisations who have trainers within their own respect who are emergency services background. So we have firefighters, we have retired paramedics, retired police officers as well. So we very much reach out to their network, and we ask them, how would you go about delivering this to children? What's your experience in this subject as well? So yeah, all of our information is very much coming from that network.
That's really great that you've able to kind of access all those people and kind of help with their knowledge. And is there bits in there as well, because in terms of career aspirations and what they need to do if they were going to look into that area? Because I know that's quite a big topic as well on a lot of Gatsby benchmarks, being able to tick another box, and like you can cross it off, like, oh, does it have this in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of our resources, it's very much focused on practicing first aid. But we do offer assemblies as well, which can be online, and we can bolt them onto day live workshops as well. We have a couple of assemblies. One of them is, the emergency services, how to call 999. And then the second one is very much focused on the careers and first response. So we talk about what it takes to become a paramedic, how to work in a call center as well, so how to take a 999 call, and how to be a community first responder as well. So working with St. John's or Red Cross, for example. So yeah, we talk about a wide range of careers and first response.
That's great. And in terms of your reach, you can go anywhere in the country. You've even we'll go over. Nathan might be listening. He's our Welsh correspondent. You've been over to Wales, and you can go anywhere in the country. Yeah.
So for example, tomorrow I'm off up to Leeds, and then previously I've been to Newcastle, Manchester, Liverpool, gone to Devon soon. So it's great being able to go national with this program.
I have this image of you on your train with your teddy bear ready to resuscitate.
Yeah. Get funny looks from everyone walking past.
He's taking his teddy on a train again. But
just let them drink Craig Danny's next to me.
And in terms of like going back a little bit to the primary school, are there any
Mhm.
kind of other? I know you've got these characters. Can you tell me a little bit more about them and any other
Mhm.
kind of fun ways that you engage the students?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got four little characters, which I absolutely love. They're fully voice casted as well. So we brought in real life primary school children to bring these characters to life, which they're very excited about. We showed them the characters, went, that's me. So we've got four little characters: Louise, Jake, Farah, and Leo. They're all a mix of backgrounds as well, and they all share a common goal, and that's they want to help their friends. So at the end of each first aid lesson, there's a little animated sort of quiz, I suppose, where each of the Resus Rangers come across a first aid emergency. So the first one is a friend's fallen off the swing at the playground and he's grazed his knee, so they want to go find a first aid kit and help him out. And then they go off on a little adventure with their teacher, and the teacher collapses, so they need to put her in the recovery position. Then we have one on CPR as well. So they're very much sort of going a little journey to the Resource Rangers. And because it's sort of by children for children, really, so they listen to each other, which is a lot nicer than having, someone who's 50, 60 odd sort of talking down to them saying, you do this, you do this, you do this. Where it's nicer for the children to relate to each other, I suppose.
I was going to say, no offense to
Mm.
St John's, but I have very much painfully watched them deliver some quite
Mm.
unexciting first aid skills. And that's the thing; it is a
Yeah.
really serious thing, but also
Mm.
it can be fun. And I think that's the thing: if it's fun, you're more likely to remember it, and then
Yeah.
that's the bit that's going to kind of benefit them. But I feel like I was that teacher. Because I originally got a DVT before I got my
Hmm.
pulmonary embolism, and I was warned that the pulmonary embolism might happen. And I was literally to my classes, right, if I collapse, who is the responsible one in this class that is going to go and get somebody? And I assigned
Yeah.
somebody in every class just in case.
Yeah.
I think they thought I was mad, but I do swear my year nines on a period 5 on Friday did give me that pulmonary embolism. I was like nearing the end of the lesson, I was like, I can't
Hmm.
breathe. I need to
Yeah.
leave and go to hospital now. Have a great weekend, kids. I survived. I made it. It's always a trooper.
Brilliant.
But it is one of those like I didn't and this is the thing I think with kids and today's technology, it's
Mhm.
very easy to Google and kind of go down that rabbit hole of kind of
Yeah.
what different conditions are and what I've got a headache. Oh my gosh, I must like have
Yeah.
cancer. And
Yeah.
it's that thing. So how do you kind of counteract the myths and things like that? Are you able to kind of educate them in terms of looking for symptoms as well and kind of get them more ideas in terms of looking at themselves and those around them?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the conditions we talk about are things that children do experience. So we have a big focus on asthma, for example. So we talk quite heavily about the effects of asthma, what it looks like, and what to do if someone's not breathing properly as well. So we talk a lot about how inhalers work because children are very fascinated when I bring out the inhalers in the workshops. Where can I have a go? It's like don't put it in your mouth, but you can have a look. So yeah, they're very fascinated by these various conditions, and if they have them themselves, they really relate to them. They get really excited that they're learning a bit more about their own body, really. So we talk about asthma quite a lot, diabetes as well, because those cases are on the rise currently in the UK. So we talk a bit about diabetes, how to recognise it, what to do if you're low in blood sugar. So again, it's having children take a bit of ownership over what's going on in their own life as well.
I think that's quite nice, and it's kind of like normalizing it as
Hmm.
well. Because
Yeah,
quite often kids will see other kids with conditions, but they won't ask the questions because they don't,
yeah,
or they'll talk about it but not ask the kid directly, or not, or make assumptions. So it's quite
yeah,
good when they kind of ask the questions to and get the
hmm,
correct answer.
yeah.
In
And
terms
until
of
now, there's not been the space to have that in a lesson, really, because that wasn't part of any other aspect of, apart from science, perhaps. But yeah, so it's nice to actually have a dedicated lesson to it to say, this is what it is, this is how we treat it. It's very manageable, so it's good for the children to hear that, you lead a normal life, I suppose, but every now and then you have a puff from your head when you feel out of breath.
And I think that's the thing as well, because especially with diabetes, I've
Mm,
know the last few years I've taught kids that have got apps on their phone and they beep when they go to a certain level,
yeah,
and other kids don't necessarily. I'm like, they're right. They need to leave the lesson. They need to go do this and sort themselves out, and they'll be back.
yeah,
But some other kids don't kind of necessarily understand why that kid has allowed their phone out to track it, and
yeah,
nobody else has allowed their phone out. Why they're allowed to kind of leave the lesson all of a sudden. I think it is kind of getting them to understand it. And the other one, which I feel like is on the rise, that's kind of an important one, me personally, is allergies as well, and nut
Yes.
allergies. Because obviously we had the young girl who bought the sandwich and then went on the plane, and the
Yeah.
laws has changed in terms of making sure
Hmm.
people are aware on terms of food. And my own niece has a really severe nut allergy. She's had two reactions at school,
Hmm.
where she's ended up in A&E because somebody has brought in peanut M&Ms and
Yeah.
opened them at the other end of the class, nowhere near to her, and has
Yeah.
still had a reaction. And I feel like had those students been educated properly on
Hmm.
first aid, on kind of the severity of reactions and how these things happen, then
Yeah.
that kid might have made a more subconscious decision to not bring them into school and not do that. So I
Yeah.
think it's also kind of by doing this kind of courses, it's prevention as well, and it's really important in that respect because you don't want to be on the receiving end of something like that.
No, absolutely. And I believe it must have been last week was Allergy Awareness Week. One of the schools I visited asked me, "Can you do an assembly all about allergies? Because we want the entire school to learn about it." There were a few students within the school who had EpiPens. They had severe allergies. So we stood up in front of the whole school. I got some children out. We got some training EpiPens out, and I showed them. This is what happens during anaphylaxis. The whole body starts to swell. You start to rash. You stop breathing. So yeah, we tell them, you call 999, you find a teacher, they bring an EpiPen, and this is how you use it. So sort of dispelling the sort of myths around it as well, dispelling the anxieties around it. So teaching people, this is what it is, very plain and simple. You call 999, you grab an EpiPen, you sustain them until the ambulance arrives.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's kind of it's that
Yeah.
opportunity for them to ask questions, but also to have that really informative chat
Mm.
where they kind of in a really fun way are learning about quite dangerous things.
Yeah.
It's such an
Yeah.
important topic, and I'm so glad that it is now on the curriculum. But it is that thing that it shouldn't be one of those things. Oh, we'll just shove it in and we'll do a lesson that's kind of downloaded
Yeah.
off somewhere. It needs to be done properly and it needs to be done with care. And it's great that there's kind of resource rangers out there. So if you want to find out more, pop on to resourcerangers.com and go look at all their resources on there. You can find out everything you need to know. So if you've enjoyed tonight's show or you're listening back, then do go and pop and have a look on there. Or if you're listening live and want to ask a question, then please do pop one into the chat, whichever platform you are listening on. Do feel free to ask those questions. And you said before, they get certificates at the end, because I know my child
Hmm.
is very certificate orientated. That will be the
Yeah.
highlight of his day. It will go on the
Hmm.
fridge.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
do the secondary school students get that as well? Do they still get excited about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, secondary schools, they bring the tellies they wanted to. They love the certificates as well. Yeah, so we send out digital certificates where the teachers can enter their students' names. They can either email them out to the teachers, to the parents rather, or print them out at school and present them to the students as well.
And in terms of kind of ticking the boxes for the school, do they get anything from you, or is there anything that, in terms of documents, that they can use to show that they've hit all the requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. So all schools become part of they become a resource ranger school essentially. So what happens after the workshops or when they buy a package from us is we send out a little quality mark pack to them. And this quality mark pack comes with enough certificate for the school to say, this is a resource ranger school. All children now have essential first aid knowledge. It comes with a couple of posters as well that they can put on the notice boards, and it outlines what we teach them as well. So it's great for parents coming to visit the school. They can have a look at the notice boards, going, "Oh, this is fantastic! My children are learning these essential skills," and yeah, so they get that quality mark pack from us.
That's really good. And then, so in terms of the differences in your key stage 3 to key stage 4,
Hmm.
because we've kind of done the differences in primary, what's the step up really between the primary school and the key stage 3 and key stage 4? Because key stage 4 again is that difficult year where it's like it's GCSEs, this isn't as important. How do
Hmm.
you make sure that it's kind of still given justice at that point?
So with key stage 3, we talk about unconsciousness, so recovery positions, CPR, talk about choking as well, and some medical conditions. And then as you get to key stage 4, this is then when we talk about the real life issues like drugs and alcohol and cuts and wounds as well. So key stage 3 sort of goes back to the basics of first aid because they may not have done it at primary school. And the way we teach is different to the way we do the primary schools anyway. Namely, there's no cartoons for the secondary school kids. So what they get instead is live action videos with real life teenagers who, again, teach first aid. So yeah, between Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, Key Stage 3 is the basics of first aid again. Then Key Stage 4 is the more what could happen in real life first aid.
So do they have a lot of kind of action ones? Did you get actual kind of students? How did you come about it? I'm just kind of like, sorry,
Yeah.
getting my words out. Kind of thinking about how they do that. I was like, getting teenagers to do that, you're impressive. How did you come up with the kind of the ideas and the concepts, and how did they feel kind of acting it out?
So my background was very much in media production. So before I joined the company, I ran my own little production company where I made and edited videos. As part of that, I worked with children before and some other projects. So I very much had that in the back of my mind, and I thought, if I were to have teenagers teach teenagers first aid, what's that going to look like? How are we going to get them engaged? So I decided to make sure that we cater to all stages of teenagers. So of course you get, the 12, 13-year-olds who are, not quite apathetic yet. They're getting there. Then you get to the 15-year-olds who don't want to be there at all. Like the year 10s who sort of sit at the back of the classroom and yes, somewhat disengaged. So we try to cater to all sort of ages within Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. So we have some characters who are still very bright and lively. Then we have other characters who are sort of the more straight talking ones as well. So we try very much meet them eye to eye, really. And the form that we take with the videos is a bit like the old 80s videos where you plug into a VHS and you get a person, and this is what you do in an emergency, this is how you roll someone over. But instead of being, a fully grown adult, it's now teenagers who are talking like teenagers, acting like teenagers, but, delivering these essential skills.
I love that. I was just like, teenagers actually did something,
Yeah.
and they're engaged with it. And I think that's the thing. It is when we get to, I've done PSHE with Key Stage 4, and it can be painful at times. And I think this is the thing. We want, as teachers, an easy life. So we want all the resources which you provide us. We don't really want to think about it. So it's great that you do the training so we can talk through it. We want to know easily how to solve the problem, so you've got your troubleshoots, and the fact that it's really engaging and it's kind of teenagers doing it for teenagers, so it's relatable to them. And it sounds like it's like done in a really fun way. Quite often when I've seen things, like I've had police come in and do sessions on kind of running on train lines, because I live next to our school is there, and it's all very seems to be done on the shock factor, like you must not do this because of this, and it's really dangerous, so don't do this. And I think like it's almost sometimes it can be like counterproductive, but actually you want something they're going to engage with, they're understanding and learn from and kind of take forward. And I think this is kind of much more along those lines. What have you found in terms of kind of creating it? What do you feel like is the best bit, or the bit that you've enjoyed the most when doing it?
That's a great question. I think the thing I've enjoyed the most is sort of embedding the videos into the resources themselves. Because a lot of resources, more and more, especially for secondary schools, perhaps primary schools as well, are relying on videos and music and ways to keep their brains engaged and motivated. So I think finding ways of using videos to our advantage, not only to break up the lesson for the teachers, but also for the children to take a moment to just sit back, absorb the video, and then once they've done that, they can then go off and do the practicals. So that's the way we sort of structure the lessons. We give them a bit of theory, we give them the video, then off you go, practice CPR using a pillow, using whatever you have around the classroom, roll each other over, do the recovery position. That's sort of structuring those lessons in a way that's going to keep the children engaged all the way through was something we felt was really important and something I really enjoyed doing.
And they have all the other bits, so they've got the resource and they get to practice. I feel like every American film has one of those where they all practice a bandage on each other, like and put an arm in a sling is a must-have. And it's, I suppose, what about in terms of kind of looking for signs and symptoms? So I feel like that's quite an important one in terms of educating, and especially you mentioned previously sepsis, which is like a national campaign, isn't it, to make sure people are aware of that. How much of it involves kind of looking at those kind of things as well?
Yeah, so that sort of comes to the theory part of the lessons. So again, we break it up to those three sections. So the first initial section of the lesson is always about the theory behind it. So what to look out for sepsis, for example. We talk about how to spot infected wounds, how to prevent them happening in the first place, and for medical conditions as well, like anaphylaxis, for example. We tell them that these are the signs and symptoms, and it could happen within seconds, or it could be a slightly slower onset as well. So yeah, we do have a lot of emphasis on fact finding and triaging a patient as well, working out what's wrong and who to go to first.
And in terms of kind of making it adaptable and scaffolding it for different learners, how do you make it so that SEND students can kind of access the learning as well?
Yeah, so what we've done with the PowerPoints is we've enabled teachers to adapt as they see fit. So they're able to change the font size, the colors as well. So in terms of the resources, it's very much down to the teachers and how they can adapt it to suit their children's needs. And then when it comes to practicals, again, we very much talk about this is the standard practical lesson. You get the children to roll each other over. If a child's not comfortable to do this, you can ask them to do this instead. So we very much make sure that the teachers feel confident delivering to any student they have within the classroom.
Because that's really important. I think that's something that's not always thought about as well in resources. So it's lovely that you've included that. Is there anything else that you can think of in terms of navigating the site or finding the resources, or if they've got any questions, how to get in contact with you and kind of ask, or how schools can inquire as well in terms of availability and things like that?
Yeah, so you can find everything on our website. So starting with the website, we have the three different avenues of what we offer. So that's the resources, that's our workshops, that's our assembly package as well. So based on that, teachers can send out an inquiry form, and so they can ask us any questions they have about our resources. In terms of booking workshops as well, again, you can pop us an email, and we're gladly check our calendar as well. Towards the summer months, we always get booked up quite quick. So if you are looking, get your invoice in quick. So yeah, the website has all the information you need. So just pop us an email, and we'll gladly answer any more and get the process going for you.
And did you say that you can do some of the assemblies virtually as well?
Yeah, so our assembly package is 3 virtual assemblies, and they just hit the requirements head on for primary schools.
So that's great, because this is the great thing. The great thing about COVID is the technology that's come out the other side, and it's nice that we can kind of do that all over the country. And how long are the assemblies?
So again, they can adapt to each classroom setting. They're usually 20 minutes at a time, but easily we can make them 30 or even 15 minutes as well. There's 3 lessons you can have throughout the year, starting with how to make a call to 999. Then what to do, it's called the movers assembly. So the recovery position, shock position, W position. So how to deal with basic medical emergencies. And then the third assembly is injury meet and treat. So what you find in the first aid kit, how to treat minor and major injuries as well.
So that's nice that you can kind of get them as a step, but you can pick and choose when you deliver them.
Yeah.
So that's great. You seem to be very much like, what is schools wanting and how do we make it fit within that? And it's nice that it's kind of adaptable and changeable within that. It's one of those that, in terms of the curriculum, how much do you feel like that? Do you feel like that you wish that there was more detail in terms of what schools should do, and do you feel like there should be more that could be added, or do you feel like actually this hits all the curriculum requirements, but actually we go well beyond what they're asking us for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially for primary schools as well, it's very, again, those 2 lines are so bare bones. I think making an emergency call, fantastic, great score. I'm so glad they specified that. Then the second line is dealing with a few basic injuries, such as head injuries. Again, head injuries, especially for primary school children, is something that we're really, really focused on. But yeah, I would wish that the guidance had just a bit more specific, so schools are aware that children should learn how to deal with an unconscious patient, what to do if their friend has an asthma attack. So yeah, especially for primary school children, I wish they would be a bit more specific. But I suppose that's a good thing from our perspective. We can say to schools, these are your requirements, you deliver these lessons. But if the children are engaged and motivated, we have all these other lessons as well. So they're more than happy to just hit the requirements, or they can have a whole first aid education that the children really enjoy.
Is there an area that you find that children are most interested in? Is there like a bit that they ask the most questions about?
CPR. It's always CPR because they see it in the TV shows and the movies. Yeah, they absolutely love talking about CPR. And as soon as I say the word first aid, the children immediately gravitate and start pumping on the chest. I've not even said the word CPR yet. They're immediately going, yeah, look, staying alive, staying alive. It's like, not yet, not yet. But yeah,
It's like
CPR.
the washing the hands to happy birthday. It's automatically
Yeah,
that,
that's
isn't
it.
it? But I
Yeah.
find it really interesting because a lot of them don't realise that there's different ones for different age children and things like that.
Yeah.
And same as like if it's a drowning victim, because I'm obviously my school is very close to the sea and doing
Yeah.
sea safety and thinking about that. But so do you include all of that areas and like talking about different age ranges and things like that? You've got the. Is there a different name for the baby? I just remember having
Yeah.
a pink stripy suit on. That's all I remember.
Yeah, those are baby Annies.
Baby Annie. They just I
Yeah.
thought they had different names for some reason.
No, so we've got Resus Annie, we've got Little Annie and Baby Annie. I always call them Bob when I do my workshops, though. So here's Bob. Bob's having an emergency. This is how we do with Bob.
I remember because and in terms of the scenarios, are they kind of fun scenarios and things? I remember always for some reason. I don't know whether it was just my lifeguarding training. They like to be extreme. It was like there's when you had to check whether they're conscious or whether it's safe. It's like there's always an electric wire next to a giant puddle, or there's a
Yeah.
snake slithering away, and it's like it was always like really dramatic and almost a little bit unlikely.
Yeah.
But how did you come up with all this? Because you must have come up with a lot of scenarios for this training.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
throw in the kind of fun ones, or do you have kind of a lot of more kind of regular kind of scenarios?
Yeah, so what I ask the children to do is I get them sat. It's usually a hall, especially if there's a big group. They're sat in the hall. I tell the children, okay, look around your hall. What dangers could there be? Let's say someone was in the room. They're flat on the floor. We don't know why they're on the floor. So have a look around. What could have happened to them? You know, they could have slipped on some water. Perhaps they fell off the climbing frame. Perhaps they tripped over a chair. So yeah, I get the children to just say what they see around them because those are the likely things they're going to injure themselves on. And then in terms of the resources, one of our lessons is all about recognizing danger. And as part of that, we've mocked up we've mocked up a living room and a playground and littered it with lots of different things in the home and in the playground that could be dangerous, like a broken seesaw. We've got sparking cables near some water, as you said, balls by the stairs. Yeah, lots of different like household dangers that hopefully when they go home that night, they're going to say to the parents, oh, that's unsafe. That's not safe. So annoy the parents, but you know, it's great for them.
I think that's it as well. It's kind of thinking about all the scenarios that could happen that haven't happened, but also thinking about kind of the most common ones that they're gonna come across. And I think it's easy, isn't it? Especially when you're young, you automatically think of first aid as all the extreme things of like a car crash or something like that. I mean because we were as beach lifeguards trained up as first responders, and we happened to purely by accident we had to train on a Thursday morning, and 3 Thursday mornings in a row we were the first people on car crash every time, and then we ended up doing work with the fire brigade and learnt how to cut off the tops of cars just in case, because that's normal. But it can be this kind of snowball that as soon as they've experienced something, it kind of ticks that kind of intrigue box and they can kind of learn more about it. And I think this is the thing, unless you've got that experience or had that experience, you don't really have that background. And it's nice that there's somewhere to go for teachers to kind of get that information and be able to deliver it correctly, but in that really kind of fun way. So I'm just going to thank you very much. We've been chatting away. It's been an hour already, flying by. And thank you for everybody that's watching. We've got over 1,000 people watching us live right now. So if you have got a question, we're going to give you a couple more minutes. If anybody wants to quickly message in a question before we finish, then feel free. But it's really important that schools are ticking this, and it isn't just a tick box exercise. It's done well and it's done correctly, and that the kids are getting something out of it that is going to make a difference. And like you said, it is really shocking when you think about, like you said, this kind of came about because of that bombing, that actually people didn't have first aid experience. And I guess because I've always had that, I've never thought about if I'm in a situation, I'm not like that person on a plane when they go, is anybody a doctor? And I'm like, yeah, me.
No.
But like, I do feel like I could genuinely help in that scenario. And children will feel the benefit of it. Like I said, I have got a very, very avid year 11 who's a St. John's ambulance and does it like avidly all of the time. And if there's
Brilliant.
a kid that's feeling faint, I'll be like, can you go and take them and have some fresh air? You walk with them in case anything happens. Or if anybody cuts themselves, he's like, I ran and get the first aid kit and like, is the first person there? Like, you need to use this and then you need to use that. And it is something that they can get really passionate about, but it's really important that it's done in an exciting way that isn't going to kind of put them off wanting to learn about it. And I think Resus Rangers just looked absolutely great. And I really want to see a whole classroom of kids doing first aid on their little teddy bears. That image is going to stay with me tonight as one of my favourite things that I've learned about. If anybody is interested, like I said, do pop along to the resusrangers.com website, go and have a look at all their resources. They've got amazing resources, so you can get your lessons and they can ask you guys to kind of run through them and how to deliver them. You also do the workshops yourself, so you can go in and deliver them. You can do a whole day and cover loads of classes if you're a slightly bigger school, so don't feel like you can't. If it's only for little schools, you can fit everybody in there, and you've got your assembly packages as well, which they can spread out or kind of deliver. You can add those onto the package days when you do the training as well.
Yeah, assemblies, we can do them as part of it. So we can do a live assembly in the morning for all children, or you can have the online assemblies throughout the year as well. So it's very much depends on, the time that you have, the resources you have. We're here for every school.
And just thank you so much for giving up your evening and chatting to me about it.
It's been great. Thanks for having me.
And like I said, if anybody has any questions, do pop over to the website and send Stephen a question if you've got any. And I'm sure they'd be more than happy to answer them. And maybe your class can be resussing teddy bears soon and enjoying that. What a great lesson. And the kids would just love it. So thank you so much for joining me. And thank you, everybody that's watching and listening. And I hope the rest of your week goes really well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.